Hello, YouTube. Welcome back to the Rough Cut Diamond Mines and the place that I go to find the rough ideas that we can then turn into something a little more polished. I'm your guide, Dreamscript. It's part 4 of our Cursed Relics Art Challenge. Like I've mentioned in previous ones, you do not have to watch these videos in any kind of order, but if you want, I will have a playlist ready for you on my channel with all of them. Anyway, moving on, let's find out what we're working with today. Let's see, double checking our list, day 4 is a comb. Now, personally, I don't actually know a lot of cursed combs. Outside the one early in the run of the original Inuyasha series, Yuri of the Demon Hair, I think it was. Uh, the comb that the evil queen uses in older versions of Snow White doesn't really count because it was just a poisoned comb, not cursed. I wonder how many more are there actually out there in media? One second. Okay, one quick search later, and it looks like there's not too much about cursed combs outside of the different people doing this art challenge. So, props to them for being the first result. Good for you. But that feels a little like a wasted opportunity. A comb can be such a personal item to somebody. It's used to control your appearances, tame rows and rows of wildly growing strands. Some are even made to help with the shedding of your own scalp. For some, it can be a sentimental item passed down from parent to child, a gift between lovers, or an item that is used during special times of day or only for special events if it is ornamental enough. Not to mention, it is a rather small object that can easily be slipped from one person to another. There's so much possibility for a cursed comb that I'm a little surprised it hasn't been used more often. I mean, compared to things like cursed swords that are so many, you can't traverse one dimension without tripping over 5 of them, as a friend of mine can confirm. Thinking on all the possibility of this particular prompt, I decided to go with this sticker. It's definitely more on the steampunky side, but I do like the bone and dangling elements of it, since this leans more towards an ornamental decorative comb, similar to ones used to keep a hairstyle in place. However, if you've been following since the start, you'll know that we still need one more piece of information before we can really start, and that's curse severity. Let's go to the wheel. Spin! And it's another deadly slow artifact. Huh. Okay. Was maybe hoping to get through all the options at least one time before we had repeaters, but okay. A comb that kills you slowly. Huh. Ugh, what do I even do? I mean, that poisoned element could be used in a more supernatural sense, but that feels a little on the lazy side. The sticker has a pocket watch kind of look to it. Time. Oh! Okay, I think I have something fun for this one. Let's make a cursed artifact. Those that saw the primary sketch of this one will see that I did sketch it with those kind of teethy comb prongs. I don't know if there's a proper term for them. That would be used to hold it in place like a hair clip. And while I do think that this version still has that, obviously the way I've presented it in the picture makes it so those aren't actually visible. And since it's basically taking the place of a big hair bow when it's being used like this, I definitely leaned more into the decorative element of this one to make it look more like something someone would actually buy and wear regularly. Remember when I mentioned in the other video how I wanted most of these articles to look obviously cursed? This is one of the few that I wanted to be not as obvious. The skull does make it a little more on the morbid side, but full honesty, if somebody gave me a present that looked like this, I would not be mad about it. Actually, I might actually try to make this myself one day. Once I figure out how to do that is. This one is on the weirder side than the others because I'm not really reaching for the sticker for the colors here. I decided early that I wanted to go for something closer to an actual butterfly or moth to add to that this is something someone would actually want to wear theme. Honestly, I think these colors might be closer to an atlas moth, but I didn't plan for that one. I was listening to a bunch of Insidious videos in the background when I was working on this one, so I guess that influence must have leaked into the design. Inspiration comes from the most fun places, doesn't it? And this one came together pretty quickly compared to the last few, so I think we're nearly done here. With that said, let me tell you the tale of this cursed relic. Enjoy! It was sitting so innocently on the pillow in the store window. It wasn't the kind of thing he might have usually bought, but something about it made him feel confident that his little sister would have loved it. 2 gold coins later, and he left the store with the strange comb neatly packed and wrapped in his pocket. His sister had always been a frail girl, so much so that after she'd been born, several doctors said that she likely wouldn't make it past childhood. Because of that, every time she did reach a new birthday, the family celebrated it with vigor. This year was going to be her 13th birthday, and she had been starting to grow a little stronger. So much so that her parents were actually considering having an open event for her birthday, unlike their usual private ones. Almost a public debut for her, despite her still being so young. Such a special occasion deserved an equally special gift, he told himself. When the day of the event finally arrived, everyone who the family knew, and even some the family didn't know especially well, had been invited and driven by curiosity of the young girl who had been largely out of the public eye, all accepted and arrived with lavish gifts for her. His sister had never been exposed to so many people at once, and as such it was hardly a surprise when she immediately became shy to all the attention and overwhelmed by the noise. To redirect her where she would be less overwhelmed, their parents let her loose on the small mountain of presents that had been accumulated in a corner of the hall. Many of them from the guests that didn't know her well had brought safe, largely inoffensive gifts. Bottles of perfumes, hair ribbons, hand mirrors, the occasional journal or book, all various levels of fancy or elegance, but again, largely inoffensive, uninspired gifts. And then she came upon his gift. Her reaction was at first surprised, but then turned to delight, and she immediately donned the ornate comb in place of her dull and everyday ribbon. The way the details of it caught the light was almost as bright as her smile as she danced around the room with it. Her brother smiled to himself, elated to see his sister so alive and happy. But then came the next morning, and where his only newly teenaged sister had fallen asleep, a now fully grown woman with those same innocent eyes was woken by the startled screams of her personal caretaker. This woman was just as confused by what had happened as everyone else, clearly only having the same memories and personality as she did when she went to bed. Somehow, his sister had apparently aged 10 years. And though nobody would ever dare to voice that tiny thought, there was a part of everyone that was to some degree delighted to see her reach this age, given the severity of her long ailment. Over the next few days, his sister adjusted to her sudden growth, as did everyone else. She was still treated with the same great care, as they didn't know the reason for her aging and if her natural frailty followed with it. But suddenly, almost a week later, everyone awoke to find that once again the girl had been aged, this time 20 years. The changes were more subtle this time, but it's clearly noticed when she meets with her mother, and they look almost identical. However, that's not the only thing that's happened to the so recently child. It's becoming harder to see her. Her edges seem to be almost blurred at a glance. At first, it's dismissed as the alarm of her second surge of aging. Everyone's rattled at this point, and no one knows if this is going to be a permanent fixture or if there's going to be another aging. And they don't have to wait long to find out. Another week passes, and again they all wake to find her aged, this time by 30 years. The frailness that they thought the aging had bypassed has now returned with a vengeance. Her skin, now bearing the lines of elderhood that have not yet even reached her father. Bruises with the slightest touches. She can only travel halfway down the grand stairs before she must rest to catch her breath again. Her face has become unnervingly pale, and many of the staff begin to liken her to a specter. a similarity that is not helped with the way she's begun to shimmer in and out of focus. Yet another week, and the scream that awakens the house no longer brings surprise, only the mounting sense of dread. She has aged 40 years this time. Tears fill her brother's eyes as he looks down at what used to be his younger sister. Though aged beyond any reasonable expected lifespan, he can still see the little girl trapped inside this body that now aches and pains at the slightest movement, looking back at him with eyes that were begging for help, but he doesn't know how. The family has by now called the aid of every doctor they can afford to little aid. They had tried to call just as many mages to the house, but they too can offer nothing in terms of comfort or solutions, as the cause of the aging is still unknown. The next aging happens much sooner than they were expecting. In only a few days, the girl has been aged another 50 years. This age is far more than any human should ever be able to live, possibly even with the aid of magic, and yet she remains alive, though her form is becoming more and more incorporeal each day. There are times when the nurses helping her through the days find their hands passing through her, but at this point she's so fragile. Even the lack of a touch might be less painful. Her parents cannot bear to see this happening, but her brother does not leave her side anymore. He sits by her bedside for days, hands hovering over her own, not daring to touch her in this state. He rarely eats, and has promised not to sleep. On the third night of his vigil, his eyes, having long grown heavy with the need for sleep, are drooping, nearly closed, when something starts to glow in the room. The light snaps him to attention like nothing else has, and he turns to spot the source, sitting on her vanity. That strange comb. The clock hands on the face he had once thought so charmingly quirky start to tick, the glow beginning to swirl as those hands move. 1 cycle. On the bed, his sister lets out a soft gasp, and he looks around to see the glow of the comb is also swirling around her. 2 cycles. 3 cycles. Dread, guilt, and unparalleled fear bubble in the pit of his stomach as he realizes the truth. Jumping to his feet, he rushes towards the comb. He doesn't know if he can stop it or even reverse what it's doing, but he has to do something. He won't just stand by helplessly if there was something he could do. 4 cycles. The glowing of the comb is growing brighter, and a glance over his shoulder tells him that it's beginning to age his sister once more. Acting on his first instinct, he grabs the heaviest nearby thing and smashes it over the comb. The object breaks, but barely leaves a scratch on the comb. 5 cycles. He reaches for the comb again, trying to stop the hands, to break them, move them backwards, anything. But his fingers pass through the object as if it were made of mist. He can't touch it. He can't stop it. He can't do anything. The hands move into the midnight position. At the same time, the grandfather clock in the hallway begins to chime the same hour. The glow flickers and now fades away. His heart sinks like a stone in his chest. Behind him, he hears a wheeze of breath. He hesitates only for a moment before he turns to see the damage he's caused. At this point, he can't even fathom how much his sister has aged. 60 years this time? Maybe more? The husk that now rests in her bed can barely be recognized as someone who mere weeks ago was a sweet child with a potential future ahead of her. The skin, now paper thin and cracking in some places, is stretched tight over her bones, leaving her gaunt and hollow. What little hair remains is thin and colorless. Truly, the only color in her face now is that of the blood beginning to ooze through the cracks. She wheezes again, and he can see her trying to raise a hand. He rushes to her side, the tears now beginning to fall thick and fast down his face as he kneels beside her. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," he whispers as if afraid the sound of his voice alone will break her. She looks up at him, and even still, even in this state, her eyes have not changed once. His sister is still there, She can still hear him and sees the look on his face. Even as her skin cracks to do so, she smiles, almost serenely, at him. It was a beautiful present you got for me, big brother, she croaks in a dry voice, and then closes her eyes as her body falls away into little more than dust, and his cries of grief and sorrow begin to fill the air. Thank you everyone for watching this far into the video. Obviously, I have more speed draws and these stories coming up soon, so I'll hopefully see you all next time. Until then, sweet dreams, and here's to all the little things that bring out the magic in you.